This is Joe, a third-grader high school student. His cheerful nature made him liked by many of his classmates. That day, after the study tour to the planetarium, Joe and his classmates took the bus back to school. When he arrived at school, Joe received an email saying that he had just won first place in the National Short Story Competition. He was very happy, but when he was about to cross the road, he was hit by a car and lost his life. After the funeral at school, his friends gathered to pray for him. They were all sad about losing a friend who was always cheerful. As the week passed after the school festival was over that day, a student named Pei approached the photo of the late Joe. He was a transfer student from another school and had only moved a month ago. Because he rarely socialized, Joe was the only friend he had. Seeing the photo of the late Joe, he suddenly remembered the first day they met. At his old school, Pei was always bullied by other students, so he never had friends. Pei tried to fight back, but because the fight was so bad, he was punished and expelled from school. A few months later, he moved to Joe's school. After introducing himself in front of the class, he sat on an empty seat next to Joe. Joe cheerfully asked Pei to be friends, and that made Pei a bit shocked because it was the first time a student asked him to chat since he was often bullied. He seemed to have forgotten how to make friends. Because Joe was too talkative, Pei was annoyed and kept telling him not to bother him. Since Joe passed away, Pei always looked alone and didn't have any friends like before. That morning during class, a representative from an arts university came to announce that they were holding a short film competition, and anyone who wanted to take part in the competition and succeed in getting the top 10 would be given the opportunity to go straight to their university via the merit route, meaning they didn't have to take any entrance test. Hearing that, all the students were indifferent except for Pei. Knowing that his grades were mediocre and it would be difficult to register for college, Pei was interested in taking part even though he didn't know how to make a film. But to be able to continue his studies, he registered. In the afternoon in the canteen, after finished explaining the competition rules, the committee told him that before making a film, Pei must first make a short story. The committee also said the top 10s were those whose story ideas could touch the hearts of the audience. Even better if the film was based on a true story. When he saw a photo of the late Joe, Pei suddenly got the idea to make a film about Joe. However, because he had only been friends with him for a month and didn't know much about him, Pei started interviewing other friends. In the library, while looking for story material in the school yearbook, Pei found Joe's life motto that said, "Imagination is more important than knowledge." He became motivated after reading that. At night at home, Pei started writing short stories while remembering his memories with Joe, but after writing for an hour, he only got 2 words. He then tried to get some inspiration by summarizing the video of the interview, but after hours of summarizing, he only added 2 more sentences. He was frustrated, but when he wanted to give up, he remembered that Joe once told him about a short story he had written. Coincidentally, he had Joe's hard disk which he left on the bus on the day of the study tour. Luckily, when he opened it, a copy of the short story was there. It was entitled Fireworks and Star, and the story was about parallel worlds where other versions of Joe existed. After reading the story, Pei decided to use Joe's short story as the material for his short story. After changing the name of the writer, he then sent it to the competition committee. The next morning, Pei found out that the short story was accepted and he was happy about it. It was just a matter of how to make it into a short film. Not long after, a student from another class named Boka approached. Knowing that Pei wanted to make a film about Joe, she offered to help as the cameraman. At first, she thought that the film was made to commemorate the late Joe, but she discovered that Pei had another goal, namely just to get into college. She was disappointed. She shouted at him for using his deceased friend for his personal matter. Pei panicked, but luckily, he was called by the principal. When he faced the principal and saw Joe's mother, Pei panicked. Joe's mother had found out about Pei's plan to make a short film about Joe, so she decided to help by handing over all of Joe's photos and would fund the project with 50,000 baht from Joe's insurance money. Pei's sweat poured down. He didn't expect that his plan to make a film to get into college turned out to be like this. When he wanted to refuse, the mother cried while begging him to let her help. Pei was forced to accept it. In the afternoon in the hall, the principal was announcing the special film that Pei would make for the school graduation day. Again, Boca approached Pei and threatened that if he insisted on making the film, she would tell everyone that he wasn't making this film for the sake of remembering Joe, but just so he could win the competition and go to college. She told him to give up or she would expose his rotten plan. Pei had a dilemma, and not long after that, the principal called Pei to the stage. During his speech, Pei said that he wanted to admit something, but instead of being honest, he claimed to be Joe's closest friend. He said that his film project was inspired by Joe's last short story and was sure everyone would be touched by it. After the speech, when he found out that Boca wanted to complain to Joe's mother, Pei hurriedly caught up with her. When Pei wanted to return him the money and explain everything, Joe's mother looked sad, and because they didn't want her to be disappointed, they both canceled telling her about everything. The mother then invited them to the house. When they entered Joe's bedroom, Boca immediately started crying. She couldn't believe that her friend was now gone. Amid the sadness, Pei, who didn't understand how to make a film, asked Boca to help him. The next day, not only Boca, but Pei also recruited 4 other students from the audio-visual club. At first, they refused to help, but when Pei said that he would give them a computer as a gift, they immediately wanted to do it. After the team was formed, Boca divided the duties. She would be the cameraman, Pei became the director, while the rest would help edit the video and prepare the props needed for filming. Before starting, they all took photos as a memento. After the photo, the club leader Ping asked who would play Joe's role. Because he looked closer like Joe, Pei told him to play the role, and whether he wanted it or not, he had to cut his hair like Joe. After that, Pei began telling the story. Since the beginning of the story told about Joe being an athlete, Boca had an idea to make Ping a table tennis athlete. Day after day, they continued filming according to the theme written in the short story, from a spy to astronaut, until finally, one night, only the last scene of the film was left, the scene about separation. During the discussion, Pei suggested to shoot the scene in the amusement park with all of Joe's classmates to make it more touching. They would also set off fireworks as a sign of farewell. Everyone agreed. That night, the whole crew stayed at school. While chatting with Pei, Boca confided to him. She and Joe had been friends since middle school, and the two of them were very close, but one day, Boca accidentally revealed a secret about the girl Joe liked to their classmates, and since then, they never spoke again. She regretted that before Joe died, she didn't have time to apologize. Hearing the story just now, Pei tried to cheer her up. He thanked her that because of her help, he was able to make the film. At that moment, the relationship between the two started to become close. A few days later, the final school exams arrived. Before the exam, Pei decided to send the film work in progress file to the committee, and his film received a good response. He was so happy that when the bell rang, instead of entering the classroom to start the exam, he skipped class and used his time to make the storyboard for the last scene. A week passed after the exam, and Pei was seen with his classmates, taking photos for the farewell book. In the middle of the preparations, a student named Om came. He rarely came to school because he was often sick. Om used to sit beside Joe before Pei came. Pei and Om then chatted about the Joe they knew. After school, Om invited Pei to come to his birthday event next Sunday. On Sunday, Pei asked Boca to accompany him to the birthday event. During the event, when Om found out that Pei was making a film about Joe, he suddenly remembered the short stories he had written before. When he told everyone his short story, Pei and Boca were surprised to find out that the short stories were exactly the same as Joe's short stories. They didn't think that all this time Joe had been stealing Om's short stories. Om said that he had terminal cancer. When Joe was still alive, he was the first person to know about his short story. That day, when Joe went to visit, Om showed him his short story. He was very amazed and then asked the reason Om didn't take part in a short story competition. A short story as good as might have a chance to win, but Ohm was pessimistic. The doctor said he wouldn't have long to live, so it was no use taking part in the competition. Upon hearing that, Joe secretly took the short story without Ohm knowing. That night, Pei and Boca went home together by taxi. Pei was disappointed that Joe, who he thought was a good person all this time, turned out to be like this. Though he didn't know what Joe's purpose in stealing it. Whatever the reason, stealing is stealing. Pei worried that if the film was shown on graduation day, Joe's lies would be exposed, and not only Joe but their good name would also be tarnished. Boke was also worried. After returning home, Pei kept thinking about whether the film should continue or not until finally, after contemplating for a long time, the next day at the amusement park, while getting ready to shoot the film, Pei decided to change the main character's name. While the face looked like Joe, but all the main character's name in the film was changed to Ohm's name. Boke protested because he suddenly changed it, even though from the start, they all agreed to make the film as a memory of Joe, but Pei had made up his mind and she could just leave if he refused the idea. Boke was disappointed. That night after the amusement park closed, Pei prepared to shoot the film. Because they only had one chance to shoot, Ping told Pei to let Boke handle the camera, but Pei insisted that he would be the one to shoot the scene. On the other side, while waiting for the shooting process, Boke opened Joe's hard disk. When she saw memorable photos of her and Joe in middle school, Boke couldn't hold back her tears. Finally, the shooting process was finished and thankfully, it went smoothly. After the shooting, Pei suddenly got a call, informing him that Ohm was in critical condition in the hospital. The next night, Pei and Boke went to visit Ohm. When they arrived to make Ohm happy, Pei showed the results of the film to him and his mother. Ohm cried after watching the film. He was grateful for the film that Pei made and he seemed to have hope of living again. Pei was happy to hear that. Amid the conversation, Pei realized that Boke had taken away the hard disk, so he rushed to catch up. The two of them had a big argument. Boke insisted on showing Joe's film on graduation day, while Pei was against it. He had made up his mind not to do it. Both blamed each other. Because she was so angry, Boke threw the hard disk on the road until it was crushed by a car. In disappointment, Pei said he didn't want to see her face again. Boke just remained silent and then left. When he got home, Pei panicked because the deadline for submitting films for the competition was tomorrow at noon. But the hard disk was damaged, so he was forced to try to make an impromptu film from a collection of Joe's memorable photos. Unfortunately, even though he had been editing all night, he couldn't finish on time. He failed to take part in the competition, meaning he couldn't go to college. When he saw his friends graduate and enroll in top-level universities, he could only remain silent and hold back his sadness. When he met Ping, he gave him a flash drive containing a simple film that he made for tomorrow's graduation day. However, when he found out that Ping had saved a copy of the film on the computer, he was immediately overjoyed. That evening, when Pei was about to go home, he saw that girl Joe had a crush on with another guy. Pei remembered the day Joe died. Before they returned to school that day, Joe's crush confessed her feelings to him. He didn't expect that he could end up with the girl he had a crush on. Pei, who was on another bench and heard the conversation between the two, was happy. On the way home on the bus, Joe told Pei that he finally had a girlfriend. Pei was surprised because he, who wasn't that close to Joe, was the first person to be told about it, as if Joe already considered him a close friend. Because he was carried away by the atmosphere, Pei showed a video of his girlfriend on his cell phone, while telling stories about his ex. When they arrived at school, that was when Joe received an email that informed him about his win in the short story contest. But he refused to take the prize money because his goal in sending the short story was just to introduce the work of his good friend Ohm. It turned out that all this time, Pei and Boke misunderstood him. After remembering all that, Pei looked at the sky while imagining another version of him and Joe in another parallel world. It would be nice if Joe was still alive. The next day at the school graduation event, Joe's mother came to see a film made by Pei. Pei gave a speech and then showed the film. However, it turned out that the movie was his original and not the one from Ohm's short story. Last Night, Pei remade the film using Joe's photos, a simple film that told the story of Joe's dreams for the next 10 years. All the students were disappointed that the film they had been waiting for turned out to be just edited using a PowerPoint. They began mocking Pei by calling him names. Even though most of the students were disappointed for Joe's mother, Boca, and Joe's close friends, the film was very meaningful. The event then closed with a farewell speech from Boca. Several months passed, and that day was Pei's first day at work at a shooting location. When he arrived, he didn't expect that Boca also worked there. They both asked about each other's. At that moment, Pei was grateful that even though he couldn't go to college thanks to Joe, he was eager to reach for his dream of becoming a famous director. He imagined thanking him for being his friend in his heart.